Sew with Stacy. Today we are going to be making this beautiful little package. Would you like to see what's inside? This is a great project for any budding artists out there, or if you are interested in making a project for a friend or a family member that is an artist, as we will be creating an art roll. This is a nice little tool that allows you to store all of your markers, crayons, pencils, whatever art tool you like, as well as a little notebook so you can take it with you and travel and do art wherever you are. Are you ready to get started? Let's go! Let's start by talking about what fabric you're going to need. You will need a 1 meter piece of cotton or cotton blend fabric, something that's fairly lightweight and very flexible. You can choose whatever color or pattern you would like. That is really up to your own creativity. Next, you'll want to choose a coordinating colored ribbon. You'll need a ribbon that's about 1 inch thick. You can choose whatever type of ribbon. It could be a satin, it could be a ribbed ribbon like this one. And you will need a 1 meter piece of that ribbon. And finally, you will also need to choose some coordinating thread. I recommend you choose a colored thread that is as closely matching your fabric as possible, because we will be making some very visible stitch lines, and if it matches as closely to the fabric as possible, it won't be as visible if you make any slight mistakes here and there. The first tool from your sewing toolkit you'll need is your ruler. Along with that, you will need your fabric pencil or chalk, as well as a pair of fabric scissors. Now, these will be used to measure specific lengths and widths on the fabric and to be able to mark and cut those pieces so we can construct our project. If you happen to have a rotary cutter and a mat, you can use these as well. As always, with scissors or anything sharp, please be extremely careful. We do not want any injuries. Next, you'll want to choose your sewing pins. We will be using this to be able to pin together some pieces of fabric so they stay in place while we are sewing them. And finally, I always pull out my seam ripper because mistakes happen and you never know when you might need to pull out some seams. Our pattern for the art roll will have 2 large panels of fabric that will measure 26.5 inches by 14 inches, and 2 smaller panels that measure 26.5 inches by 4.5 inches. So what we'll need to do now is take those measurements, mark it on our fabric, and cut it out. And let's go ahead and do that now. You will need to cut about 1 meter of ribbon for our project. Don't worry if you've got a little bit more than 1 meter. We can always trim it once it's on our art wrap. We will want to construct the front panel of our art roll first. This is where we put the pens and the notebook in. So grab one of the small pieces of fabric, have the good side face up on your table, take your second piece and lay it on top and line up the edges. We will then sew a long line across one of the long edges of the panel. Once you finished your sewing on the long edge of your small panel, you will need to fold it right side out and press it along the long end. You want a nice sharp finish on that end, as this is where the pens and the notebook will go in and you don't want any snagging. Before we move on to the next step, it would be nice to create a nice top stitch along that long sewn edge, just to give it a nice clean finish. What we'll need to do next is actually mark on your fabric where we're going to sew so we can create the little pockets for the pens and for the notebook. To do that, you're going to need your ruler again, and you're going to need to have your fabric pencil or chalk. Make sure it's a color that's visible on this material. You can always test it with a sample piece that you might have thrown away after you cut the fabric. To start our markings, we're going to fold our piece in half to find the midway point. And then we're going to measure 3 1/4 inches on each side and place a mark. And then with those 2 marks, we're going to draw a line. Flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. So now when you open up your panel, you will have 2 marks that are equidistant from the midline. This is where the notepad is going to go into your art roll. You'll next need to measure out the little pockets for each of the pens. So starting from the line that we just drew for the notebook, we're going to measure 0.75 of an inch, so 3/4 of an inch from that line and make a mark. Actually just noticed I went a bit too far out, so I need to remeasure this one here. And then draw a line between those marks. So now you've created 2 lines that are 3/4 of an inch apart, and that will be the little pocket where we'll put the pin in. You need to make marks across all the finished length of this side, as well as from the other side, starting from the mark that you made for the notebook all the way to the end. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Once you are done with your markings, you should see that you have 1 middle piece, which is 6 1/2 inches wide, that will fit a small notebook. And you will have 12 on each side, little pockets for your pens, to be able to store a total of 24 markers within your art roll. With our front panel ready to go, we can now attach this to the main art roll that we're making. So get one of the longer pieces of fabric that we pre-cut and lay it on your table, right side facing up, and then place that prepared panel on top so that the unsewn edge of your panel is lining up with the bottom of the bigger piece. You'll want to make sure all your edges are lined up, as well as the bottom. And the great thing about this process is you can actually start seeing your art roll coming to life. You can see where all your markers are going to go and where your nice notebook's going to go. Once you're happy with the placement of your panel, you can go ahead and get your fabric pins and start pinning just in a few places. You don't need too many, so that the fabric doesn't move as we start sewing. I'll probably put maybe 5 or 6, just so that I feel a little bit safer that it's not going to move. Once I'm happy that everything's lined up and pinned, we're ready to sew. And what we're going to do first is we're going to start with our right hand side from the middle of the panel and sew along each of those guidelines that we pre-drew on our fabric. Starting from the middle of the fabric or the top of the small panel all the way down to the non-sewed edge. And we'll do that for every line that we drew on the right hand side. And once we're done with that side, we'll start with the left side and start in the middle and go on every line again as we hit to the edge. Let's go ahead and do our sewing now. Once you've completed all that beautiful straight line stitching, let's just trim off all of the little pieces of thread that are kind of left hanging so you can have a nice, excellent finish. You can even test out your little pockets with a pencil or a marker to see how well they fit. we're just going to put the panel we've been working on to the side for a few moments so that we can work on the next step, which is attaching the ribbon to the back panel of our art roll. So we'll need to grab the panel that we have not sewn anything on, right side facing up. We'll also need to get our ribbon. And to know where we need to place the ribbon, we need to fold our piece of fabric in half. And then from the bottom side, we want to measure up 4.5 inches. I'm going to get my ruler and measure 4.5 inches and make a mark on the fabric. When I fold it out, I can find that mark on our fabric. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our ribbon, fold that in half so it's nice and flat, and take that middle fold and place it right on that mark. Then open it up. So now we know that that is right in the middle of the mark that we made. We're going to go ahead and pin that in place. And we're going to sew one long line and a back stitch across that to secure it in place. With our ribbon neatly sewn in place, we're going to take that entire panel and place it on top of our workstation with the right side facing up and the ribbon kind of a mess in the middle. We want to have the ribbon that is closest to the edge at the bottom or closest to us, because that will be the bottom of our art roll. Now, we want to grab our other panel that we've made with all of our nice pockets, and we want to place that on top. Please note that the panel where the pockets are is going to be on the bottom of the art roll as well. So we want that line to align with the bottom of our other panel. Once we are happy lining up the two panels together, we're going to pin it, and then we're going to sew along all of the edges with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, leaving about 3 to 4 inch open hole so that we can pull out the roll when we're done. Let's go ahead and pin and get done sewing. Once you've completed your sewing, we now need to turn this right side out. First, we'll go ahead and trim the corners. You want to trim the corners just at the seam. This will give you much sharper corners when you do turn out your art roll. Now we'll just go ahead and turn out and now you have your art roll. I recommend you go take it and press the edges so they're nice and flat, and do a nice press of your fabric so it's nice and smooth. And once you're done with that, we'll do one last hot stitch across all of the corners and edges to give it a really nice finish and to sew up that hole that we have where we turned it out. Let's go ahead and do that now. Congratulations, you have finished your project for today, our beautiful art roll. The only thing now is you need to fill it up with all your wonderful art supplies and go! Thank you for joining Sew with Stacy today. If you enjoyed this project, please do like our video. And if you're interested in other DIY super simple sewing projects for beginners, subscribe to our channel and click that alarm bell to learn about new videos when we do post them up. More information about this project, as well as many of our other projects, along with lots of fun sewing hints and tips for new sewers, can be found in the description and on our website. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you soon.